Welcome. The recording has started. Welcome to week 3 in Mobile App Portfolio 2. I'm just going to share my screen on my Blackboard account here. There we go. Let me know if you guys can see that. Hopefully you can. See my screen. You guys see my screen there?
Yes.
Oh, okay, awesome. That's what I'm waiting for. Thank you. Okay, cool. All right, so I did send out this little announcement just yesterday, as well as looking forward to doing design today. So I did say please be prepared to purchase your Android developer license or your Apple developer license today. So we're going to cover that a little bit later. But if you don't have your credit card on you or whatever during the first break, hopefully you can grab one and then just be ready to purchase that. Because the earlier we do it in the semester now, the more prepared we will be able to be for the end of the semester because it takes a while for them to get approved. So sometimes I've had students have issues with their travel visas and stuff like that. So um, the sooner we can get started on this, the better. Cool. So weekly learning, week 3 is where we are now, and we're going to talk about wireframes. We're going to talk about design. I'm going to introduce assignment 1 and assignment 2. And then we're going to do a little bit of a PowerPoint and talk about some of the guidelines for Android and for Apple designing. I did want to discuss the Miro boards from last week and then get our GitHubs set up. So we can open up the Miro boards too in another tab and see what you guys came up with so far for your group collaboration. So we have this one, which is Cove Assurance. And then we have these two here, right? These look great. So we've got the UML mockups with the activity diagrams and the use cases. That's awesome. Some feedback on each. If we could get some feedback on this one, if you guys are from the other groups, that would be really, really cool. And then, so this is a voting app for young generation. And then this one we've got is our chores manager. That's cool. So SunFam, it looks like you did some great work there. And then this one is Harshil. So that's sweet. Now, are these groups right? I want to double check with you guys because I never actually received, unless I did now. I'll check if I received those submissions. I know Methune, Methune, you said you would send it today. All the group work and who's in your group and all of that stuff, I created a submission on Blackboard for.
I have done that yesterday.
Oh, you did it yesterday. Cool. Awesome.
Thank you.
So I'm still waiting for that from 2 more people, I believe. Okay, no, I've got, let's see here. Got one from SunFam and then Methune. Okay, so I need one for the last group. Do you guys know who the leader of the last group is? So SunFam,
Yes, sir.
you're the red.
Sudarshan, like we are sending it like by today only or tomorrow at max. Like
Yeah, just the sooner the better for me, but there's no
okay.
grades for it. It's just for me to know. So it's you, Hari. So is this who's all
Harshil
in your group? Harshil, Rohan, and
and
Sudharshan?
Sudarshan. Yeah.
So 4 of you guys. Okay, so you guys are yellow. Awesome.
Yep.
Okay, and so then SunFam, Manish, and Suhel, those are the right teams for you guys, right?
Yes.
Okay, awesome. Cool. Okay, that's great. So I just wanted to double check that everybody was on the right team in the right spot, so that's good. Cool. So what I did want to get everyone set up with, and I know some people submitted already. I think Methune it was actually. Is it okay if I show your GitHub that you submitted? Just as an example?
Yes, no worries.
Sweet. So this is kind of what we're looking for here. in the Lab 2 brainstorm. Sunfam, I remember I talked to you about how the requirements had changed for the submission for this. So basically, here's the GitHub from Methune, and here's the Miro board, which we have right in front of us. So this is what Methune submitted, and this is kind of what I'm looking for. Great job, Methune. I'm just going to use you as an example, but basically he's got a GitHub already made 2 months ago with all of their stuff for their group. So you can add it to an existing GitHub or you can add it to a new GitHub. But basically adding a README file, this is what I'm looking at the bottom here. So it's going to have your group members, and then they're all on the side as contributors, right? So we've got Methune, we've got Armin, we've got Salman, we've got Varun, and then I think you're just missing Dhruv here. So Dhruv, if you can get on that as a contributor, that'd be awesome. But basically, so the first thing is we've got a screenshot of their Miro board just in case anything happened on this end. So here's their Miro board where they collaborated. And then, so they've got a screenshot of it there. They give an intro for their team, Runtime Terror, which is a nice name. And then they're going to be explaining what their app does, what it offers, how they're using their GitHub, right, to track all their changes. And then they link to their Miro board here. So if I click this, it'll actually, it's kind of cool. It'll actually bring it right zoomed in to their board. Cool. And you can set that, I think either when you create the link to share it, but you can also set the, where is it? You can set the start grid, set start view right there. That little eyeball with the square. Awesome. And then if we keep going down through this, so we've got our first thing called inception phase, and they started putting some of their
No,
planning.
the link we can copy directly from that Miro board. Right click on the Miro board and we can copy the link for the particular board.
Oh yeah, okay, perfect. That's great. That's another way to do it then. That's sweet. I think the set start view might be for me then when I set the board for you guys. You might not have this option then. Okay, so yeah, better way to do it, just right click and then copy. Copy. How did you do it, Methune? You copy link right there.
Right click on the board and copy link.
Yeah, copy link. There it is. Cool. That's great. So yeah, so you guys started doing some of your planning. So I don't know, Methune, if you wanted to talk about any of these things, feel free. I don't want to take it away from you, but it looks awesome. So you've got your inception, your planning, information architecture, UML diagrams, obviously, which we covered last couple weeks, and the activity diagram. I think I did give feedback to someone on this, how it's missing the, oh no, never mind. That was something else. Looks great. I just got confused. And then you guys already have wireframes, which is great. We're going to cover that today. Okay. Just make sure these links actually go
I
somewhere.
think you don't have access to that.
Oh, okay, no worries. So then, yeah, wireframes, and then you're just going to continue your documentation as we go through all these phases, right? So for the other two groups out there, whoever the leaders are, let me just double check because I want to know who I'm talking to here. Sunfam, is Suel your group leader, or are you the group leader?
Suhei is our group leader, but usually Suhei and Manis is very busy on Friday, so I kind of took class for them on Friday.
No worries. Okay, so I will talk to you as if you're the group leader, and it can change because we're going to do a little bit of that. But so Sunfam, and then Sudharsan, are you the leader of Yellow? He's not on right now, is he?
Yes, sir. Like right now, Sudarshan is not on, but like
Okay, so if you want to tell your group, Hari,
yes,
if you want to tell your group to do the same thing with the GitHub and get that set up, and then add them as collaborators up here, this is exactly what I'm looking for. And then you're going to submit that to basically, if we go to weekly learning, week 2, you're going to submit that right here. It's called brainstorm document, but it's submitting the link of your Miro link, screenshot of your Miro collaboration board, the GitHub link with the README file, The use case and activity diagram should be completed and implemented into the Miro board as well as the GitHub README. And then please see this as an example. So then here's my example if you wanted to see. This is on my GitHub, right? But basically, same thing I just showed you as on Methune's, right? But you can see the link to mine there and then include your group members in the submission. So when Methune submitted it, he had all his group members in that README. So Harry and Sun Fam, you guys are responsible for getting your group to submit that on your behalf, or you guys can submit it on their behalf, but it is due tonight at 11:59 p.m. So you should have most of it done. If you're done in the Miro board, you just screenshot that, and then you import the UML and the use case diagrams or the activity diagrams, and then you just make a README file. So it shouldn't actually be too bad. Cool? Does that make sense about that? All good? I'm looking for thumbs up or something. But
Yes.
okay, awesome, Harry. Sweet. Okay, we can move on from that then. Awesome. Okay, so PowerPoint week 3, we're just going to get into here. I'm going to open it up on mine because I already have it downloaded. But you guys can download the PowerPoint if you want to follow along. So you guys have done wireframes before. It looks like Methune, you guys covered some wireframes. Did you guys cover that with Moose last semester, or was that something you already knew? Cool. How in depth did he talk about wireframes with you guys? Like what websites or what tools did you guys use to do your wireframes?
Figma and XD. Mostly
Figma and XD.
demonstrated using XD only, Adobe XD.
Okay, cool. So you guys have like a license for that program then?
No,
Or
not
is it
really.
free?
They're
Okay,
using
cool.
free version, Figma.
Okay, nice. Awesome. Okay, so as you guys can probably guess, we're moving from the analyze or the inception phase to the design phase now. And he's talked about wireframing and prototyping a little bit, and you guys have that done. Like Sunfam and Hari, for your guys' groups, would you guys already have some wireframes that are complete? Would that be correct?
Yes.
Yes, we have high fidelity designs also.
Awesome. Okay, cool. So I'll just briefly discuss it, but you guys will basically know all of this stuff. So what we can do soon as groups here is we'll break out into little breakout rooms or whatever, and then I'm going to introduce something called Scrums and Scrum Masters and Sprints, and it's all part of the Agile methodology, which is like a framework that we use to build mobile apps in quick iterations. So that'll be really cool, and then we can kind of actually get into the developing of our apps. I know you guys probably already started developing your apps, but we can finish developing our apps. So just a review from last week, we covered activity diagrams. We talked about the notation, the various symbols, and how to get started using them. And we just talked about what they represent, basically concurrent or sequential data, and they have initial and a final state. So yeah, remember some of these we talked about what they. Cool. So the design phase. Once the features and the functionality of your app have been determined, basically the next step that you want to start doing is designing your UX. So UX, who can tell me the difference between UX and UI? Anybody know? One's user experience and one's user interface. Yeah, Sunfam.
UI is what's shown on the screen, and UX is the whole experience using the app.
Totally, yeah, for sure. That's great. So you want basically the experience to be as smooth as possible. You want things to be intuitive. You want things to be where a user might expect to find it. So a great example of UX is like when you have a little pop-up, I don't know how to necessarily create one. Like if I, let's say I change this and then I want to close out of here and you have this pop-up. A UX has something to do with like where you place these buttons and the order that you place them in. So like save, don't save, and cancel. You know, usually you have your like yes, no, and whatever in a particular order so that if your user's like just going to go intuitively to click one, they're going to start on the left and move over to the right, right? We always read things from left to right. So in this case, you'd want to save a document before closing if it's been changed. So you put save on the left-hand side because you want them to be that to be the very first thing that they read, right? And then they move left to right and read over here. If you put save at the very end and then they just read and hit cancel, or you know, instinctively they just click the first one on the left, then you know, they wouldn't save their document or something like that. So kind of just some small things like that to keep in your mind. Basically, it's done via wireframes mockups. You guys already know this, and you don't actually have to worry about the UI yet because you're not doing colors, you're not doing font, you're not doing all that little detail. So on the right here, we can see a wireframe, and it's not worrying about font, it's not worrying about the actual image placeholder. It's just literally like the size and positioning of the elements in our screen, right? How is the flow going to work when we go from one screen to the other? What's it going to generally look like? So what are wireframes? They're basically two-dimensional illustrations that represent the space allocation and the prioritization of the content on our screen for all our functionality and intended behaviors. So, you know, you have a wireframe for your splash screen, for your login, for, you know, your timeline or email or whatever. They don't include typically styling, color, or graphics. So that's UI. All of that stuff is like the little important details. That's all user interface. Cool. What's the purpose of the wireframe? So basically, we can use it to connect our architecture to the visual design after we've made it. We can clarify consistent ways for displaying particular types of information. So if we have a couple screens that are similar in our app, so for your code assurance, if you have a couple like policy document pages or whatever, you can design them in a very similar way and make sure that it's all consistent across those designs. You can prioritize your content so you can see what's taking up the most space on your screen very easily without getting distracted by the actual content itself. And it's basically to provide a visual understanding on a page to get stakeholder and project team approval before the creative phase gets underway. Because the creative phase can be very expensive. It can take quite a bit of time. So basically, this is to kind of get a basic understanding of what it might look like before all those nitty-gritty details get ironed out, and it will save you a lot of time, because if something gets denied, basically you're not going to waste all of the time doing the color and the font selection and the pictures, because you're going to go back to the beginning process of getting the wireframes redrawn until the stakeholder and the project team are happy, right? So you have to get that approved. Cool. They take place very early on in the project lifecycle. So for you guys are basically done. You can use Microsoft Visio or whatever tools you guys already used, whatever you're most comfortable with. And just remember, we don't include colors, we don't include images, and we just use a generic font. So if I go check, here's an example in the Lab 2 wireframes in class. If I go check Methune's GitHub, if I still have it, yes I do. If we go down, we can see there's no colors, there's no images, it's all just generic font. Here, I can actually zoom in, that's great. So it's just to give us placeholder ideas, right? And so like here, all your policy name, policy holders and stuff, that's just placeholder. We don't actually have to worry about who those policy holders are. We just want to get an idea of what the screen's going to look like. And then we can see between home and rewards, there's actually a little bit of similarity between that. On the account page, we can see we're prioritizing a lot of content for whatever this image is. And then here we can see we're prioritizing these 5 things. Before we talk about the new cases, we can see that the affected, the death rate, the recovered, active, and serious cases of COVID are the top things we want to prioritize, which makes sense, right? Cool, great job on that, guys. So And then here we can see hi-fi design, or this would also be like your UI design, where you're actually picking the colors, you're actually picking the fonts. So you guys have done all this. That's awesome. Looks good. So we'll just whip through this. So another thing I want to show you guys, when you're creating your UX mockups, it's important to consider the interface guidelines. So if you're ever confused or you don't know what to do in a scenario, Methune, is your app for Android or for Apple?
Apple.
Cool. And then Sunfam and Hari, which design or which platform are you guys designing for?
We use React Native, so we design for both Apple, Apple and Android.
Okay, yeah, cross-platform. And what about you, Hari?
Android.
Android. Okay, so we got a mixture of everything. Cool. So for both, for Apple and for Android, there's these things called the Human Interface Guidelines or the Design Guidelines. And this is just a cool link you guys can click and follow, or you can just Google search it probably, but so let's see. So I've got the developer.apple.com design human interface guidelines for iOS, and then design developer.android.com/design. So just a quick scroll through of these because it's a huge website. They talk about all their design principles to make an app for iPhone look like an iPhone app, right? You might not know, but there's a reason that all good iPhone apps have, very similar styles. So we can look at the app architecture and we can look at launching, onboarding, loading, navigation, for example, would be a good one. And they talk about having hierarchical navigation. So like one screen that leads to many that goes back down, or having flat navigation like this. They talk about different types of settings. Some apps may need to provide a way to make configuration choices. And then they talk about how to do that. Visual design is more of the interesting one. So when it comes to like animation, for beautiful, subtle animation through iOS, builds a visual sense of connection. When used appropriately, it can convey status, feedback, etc. So here, if we play this, they're showing you the examples of just like little zoom in animations, right? There's another one. Icons and images. They talk about the image size and resolution. So for the device, they talk about the scale factor that you want your images to be at so that it looks good. Designing high resolution artwork using an 8 pixel by 8 pixel grid, using these types of formats. All good things to keep in mind when you're designing for iPhone. Some other ones for color. So what else do they talk about color? I don't go through the Apple one as much as I go through the Android one. The Android one I find a bit more intuitive, but let's talk about navigation bars. What does Apple say? Navigation bar appears at the top of the screen. So it's just this example here in the calendar. They say make sure that the title of your navigation bar is the current view, obviously. So some of these things are pretty obvious, but they're just basically giving these guidelines out to people who maybe have never developed before, just to make it a standard, right? And then the controls, they talk about the target sizes that you want them to be and their maximum sizes. Yeah. Now for the Android one, if we come over here, and you guys can go through this on your own time as well. They have material design guidelines, components, and then app quality guidelines. These are kind of cool. So material design is something that I guess they kind of came up with to make a standard for Android apps. Whoops. So coming over to material.io/design is where they link me to, but we can kind of see a similar thing. So they've got guidelines for color, so the color system, and they talk about, creating a palette that is all of these things with your primary, secondary color. They talk about using a color theme, and your primary color is the color displayed most frequently across your app screens, and then they have little examples of what that might look like in an app. So here's your primary color, which is the status bar. Here's your secondary color, and then your floating action button would be your third color. Dark and light secondary variants. So they show, what an example might look like with that. And this is all just about color. This whole thing, I can keep scrolling down. They show a ton of examples. This is why I like the Android one a bit better than the Apple one. But they talk about like using these colors in your themes, what it might look like for primary, secondary, etc. So that's just for color. We can talk about typography, and they talk about the type scale that you want to use, the type scale generator using Google Fonts, scale, and the size of fonts that you can use in your apps. So really interesting to read through this stuff. And you don't necessarily have to read through it. It's just more so if you're stuck on something, say you want to do some animation or something on Android, they kind of talk about how to do informative animation, focused animation, if you're getting a phone call, or expressive, right? Motion helps orient users by showing how elements in a transition are related. So, animating that when someone clicks this, it brings them to the email and expands it. You can tell which email you came from. Motion unites the menu icon with the resulting action. Right, so we can see that menu icon is expanding from those three dots. And then here, motion indicates the hierarchical relationship between dogs and cats in the navigation. So we can actually see that is bringing us over a tab, and it helps the user understand how the app works, right? So yeah, there's a ton of stuff here. Even on this page, before that was the components page, there's documentation here. There's theming, and then supporting APIs, right? So it's just crazy. They talk about all of these different things for defining your app color schemes, etc. Cool. So just thought I would show you guys that just so you know that those exist. And if you ever need it, you can click those. Cool. I was going to also add on top of that, the actual operating system dictates some UX decisions. So for example, your iOS devices don't have a physical back button unless you're, say, in like a nested menu like the settings, and then this little thing will show up in the top left. I know now on iPhone you can actually swipe back at any point, right, to go back. So that's kind of changed a little bit, but some of it still is dictated by your actual operating system. Here's an example of another activity diagram, or sorry, wireframe. But I was going to say the actual form factor, so tablet versus iPhone, influences your UX decisions. So you might be giving a different wireframe design for your tablets than you would for your iPhones. So, this one's obviously a more compact screen than this one. So similar to our mobile web applications, having a responsive design, you might have to make multiple designs for different screen sizes if you're doing one for iPhone versus iPad, etc. Cool. And then after UX, you do the UI, which you guys already did. The tool I've used before in the past is NinjaMock. So I don't know if you guys have used NinjaMock before. I can just show you guys quick. But if you are comfortable with Adobe XD, and what was the other one you guys used? It's on here.
Figma.
Figma? Okay. Yeah, if you guys are comfortable with those ones, then you don't have to worry about this too much. But basically, NinjaMock it's pretty easy to get set up running real quick. So here's like an Android device with whatever basic app I decided to put on it. And at the bottom, you have all your pages here. So, you have your login page, your password, if this is a budgeting app with barcodes and pie charts and whatnot. And then you can actually run it and preview, and I can link certain buttons to certain pages. I don't know if I have it set up right now to actually do that, but I can add, I believe you can add hyperlinks from pages to pages, so you can actually preview it and see what it would look like from clicking certain elements and where it would bring you. But yeah, basically all the elements you have are on the left here, and you can change the type of project you want to do. So this isn't just for iPhone or whatever. You can do it for websites. You can have all these, they have maps and data tables and shapes and stuff in here. But it looks like the Adobe XD one and the Figma one is a great example. So for you guys, Methune, did you guys use for this specific one, is this Figma or is this Adobe? These two.
This one is Figma.
Cool. Yeah. So that looks great. So just making you aware of another one, but awesome. So we'll close that. So for today, I was just going to get you guys to do a quick lab of uploading a screenshot of one of your wireframes that you made. So you can do one in class today. You can even use NinjaMock. Just take a screenshot of it when you're finished. It could be a very simple screen, but this is just an in-class lab, just to know you guys are following along, whatever. Gives me a bit of stuff to grade your understanding and make sure that this actually makes sense to you. But over the next 10-minute break or whatever, you can just submit this in class today, and just send me some of your wireframes, and then I can just make sure you guys are doing them the correct way. So obviously if there's no actual images and it's all black and white, no color, no fancy fonts, and it's just a basic UX design, then you should be good. Cool, does that make sense? So upload that when you have time, but I believe it is due, if we click it, I made it due tomorrow. So for people who aren't following along in class, they still have one day to do it, but if you just do it today, then it's done. Cool. Before I talk about assignment 1 and assignment 2, I wanted to go through this again in a more detailed manner, which is basically, I know we covered this a little bit last week, right? I'm kind of getting a bit mixed with I also teach mobile app portfolio 1, so I want to make sure I'm covering the right thing with you guys. Did I show you guys this PowerPoint a little bit? Remember it? So what I envision for this semester happening is, so you guys have your 3 teams on Miro here. And these 3 teams on the left-hand side, you're basically going to do 2-week sprints of development phases. And each week, or each sprint, should I say, you'll have a Scrum leader or a Scrum master. So, in this case, it'll be Suhel, Sudarsan, and Methune. You guys have the little box beside your name. And if we move that, you guys can keep your Scrum leader, but I want everyone to get a chance at some point over the semester to switch it up and have a turn. But basically the Scrum Master will be the person in charge of checking with everyone to make sure all the tasks are getting completed. So we'll talk a little bit about how Agile methodology works, and then you guys can actually break out into your groups and start doing some of your sprints, your daily stand-ups, and making sure everybody's on track. So we talked a little bit about what the Agile Manifesto is, but basically think about it in context now. This is your team, right? So red, yellow, blue, and you guys each will have a leader, okay? And you guys are a team of developers. You're a tight-knit development team. You guys got creative people on the team for design. You've got database people. You have whatever skills you need, okay? You're going to be individuals and interactions working in software over comprehensive documentation. So there's not going to be a ton of documentation. Basically, what we did at the beginning here is the most documentation we're going to do. And then now what you're going to do is mostly programming, okay? I'm going to be your customer in this scenario. So for you guys who are making Cove Assurance, Methune, I will be the person purchasing or wanting Cove Assurance to be designed, if that makes sense. So I'm going to be your stakeholder. So I've given you guys $100,000 or whatever to develop this app for me. I have you guys as a development team, and this is my idea to do this, and I'm basically outsourcing it to you guys, and I want to get it done by the end of December this year, so the 4 months that we have. And same thing with you guys for the chores manager and for the vote win idea. I've hired you guys as separate teams to do these projects. You guys are going to report back to me on like a weekly or bi-weekly basis, and we're going to go through checklists to see if you guys are actually getting things done. If I want something changed or if I don't like the design of something, I'll challenge you guys, etc. Obviously, these are your guys' ideas; they're not mine. But for the sake of treating it like a real-world application, you guys are working for a customer, right? You guys are working in a team for someone else. Cool. You can check out this website to read more about it. But so, what is Scrum? Can anyone tell me what Scrum is without reading this straight off the slide? Does anyone know what Scrum is?
It's hard to describe, but Scrum is one that uses Agile method. It's for continuous DevOps. In the simple sense, it's like to make the app that continuous improvement without starting from start to the end. Like you have a different sprint, and at the end of sprint, you have a complete production that can be used. And then we continue to improve it in the next sprint and then next sprint. Instead of doing in the waterfall method that you do it from the start and then like 6 months later, you got the final end. Something like that.
Totally. Yeah, that's awesome, Sunfam. I'm glad you actually mentioned the waterfall methodology there. So I'll show you guys what that means and what he's talking about. But basically, like he said, it's this continuous development. So you guys are always working, always coding, and you have 2-week sprints, is what we call them, but they're 2-week development periods, and they usually consist of 2 weeks at a time. And you'll select a certain number of tasks to finish and develop. And at the end of those 2 weeks, all of those tasks are finished and working and debugged, and you have a complete product that's actually working. Whereas the waterfall approach, which is what we typically did, the waterfall approach, which is what you typically would do, kind of starts and does it all in one shot. So here's maybe a verses. So the waterfall model all only happens in one way. So you can see you have conception, initiation, analysis, design, construction, testing, deployment, which, like I said, it's kind of like those 5 phases. They're still going to be the same phases, but it's only in one direction. So once you're done with conception, then you go to your analysis and design, and you don't look back. You kind of just go from one to the other, and it falls down like this, right? And then it's a very, very slow process because you have to get all the design first, done, finished, and then you can move on and do all the implementation. And then finally done, you can move on. Then you do all of the testing and the debugging, and then you can move on. Whereas with the Agile approach, basically it's this little cycle. Here's another good analogy where you start with, which one is it? The defining phase here, and you do it in a circle. So you have, imagine this is a 2-week sprint, and you have 5 functionalities that you want to get done. You want to get done the logon screen, you want to get done your register screen, you want to get done a couple of other things like the database and some profile pictures, something like that. So you define your tasks, you design them, so you actually do the UX, the mock-up, all of that stuff. You develop it and you make the pages working, and then you test them. So you test, yeah, does my login work? Does my registration work? Do the passwords, if they don't match, does it not let me log in? And then you look back and you say, okay, what can we do better? What can we change? And then you do the exact same thing. You deploy that as a working product. So now I, as the user, can test it and tell you what I like. And then in the next 2 weeks, you define 4 new tasks. Whereas here, you define all of the tasks at the beginning, you do them all at the same time, and then by the time you get to the testing, you probably don't even remember, like, what bug was this that I have to work on, or, where did this come from? So hopefully that makes sense. Here's another good, this is actually a really good one. That in there. Okay, cool. So this is what I'm talking about with daily stand-ups. So any questions before I move on? I want to try to explain this as best I can because this is what we're going to do over this semester. Any questions? I feel like there's some things that maybe I'm not making as clear. So it's okay to totally ask about this because it's a confusing concept at the beginning. Nothing? Nobody? So one last description with this picture, which I actually like because this picture does a good job. So you have a vision. You guys want to make cove assurance, all right? And you're going to create basically a bunch of user stories. And we'll talk about what a user story is in a little bit, but basically think about it like a functionality or like a login screen or something that you need to have working for your app to work. So the policies page or something like that. Okay, so you're going to create a user story, and on each user story, if it's a little document or a little sheet of paper, you're going to have all of the things that you need on that for that particular task to work. So let's say it's the policy holders document for cove assurance for the policy page. So you need, a list of users from the database. You need profile pictures to load for the people who hold the policies. You need the policy numbers to work. You need a list view, right? So that you can a scroll view. You need a scroll view so that you can scroll through all of that stuff. Okay, so that would be one user story. So in here, this kind of looks like a little database, and it is a sprint backlog. Okay, you put all your user stories into your sprint backlog. So your sprint backlog is going to contain all of the user stories you want to get done for those 2 weeks. So you're going to have something called a product backlog, which is the entire list of user stories for your whole project. Okay, and then you're only going to pick like 4 or 5 for each sprint, if that makes sense. So you might have like 200 stories that you have created for your app to be fully complete, right? And you do that in the vision phase or the design phase, and then you pick three to 5. You do them in 1 2-week sprint. So in your sprint backlog, you have 2 weeks, and here's your cycle. So you do the design, you do the actual implementation, you do testing and debugging, and then at the end of the 2 weeks, you basically create a final product that has no bugs that you can send to me as the customer in this little gift image. So the daily stand-ups, basically every day, every 24 hours in these 2 weeks, you meet together, you have a Zoom call, and you say like, okay, what are you working on today? What do you need to get done? What are you developing still? What's blocking you? So if you're the database guy and you don't have the data or whatever, or you're wanting to make the policyholders document, but you don't have the stuff in the database to actually load it, you can say that's a roadblock for me. I can't make my screen because I need the database to be populated, right? And you have a meeting that's led by the Scrum Master. And the Scrum Master doesn't actually do any of the development that week. In this case, he might because our groups are so small. But the Scrum Master typically organizes everybody else to make sure that they're all doing what they're supposed to be doing. And then you basically repeat and do this 2 weeks at a time for an entire year. That's what we did when I was working in Toronto. It was like a year and a half of daily stand-up meetings every single morning, 10 minutes, really quick. Good morning, how's it going? Cool, what are you working on? Each person's got a minute to speak. They say, I did this, this, this. I have three bugs that I'm still working on. They're this, and I'm blocked. Currently, I have no blocks, or you can say you do have a block. Something stumping you, you can't figure it out, you need help with something, and then if someone else has some free time, they can help you that day. Does that make sense to everybody? Is that good? Any questions about that? No questions? You guys are quiet today. Okay. So here's that thing again. Basically, your product backlog is all of your user stories. Your sprint backlog is the user stories you pick for that sprint of 2 weeks. You meet every 24 hours within the 2-week period, and then at the end of it, you have a potentially shippable product that you can send to me as the user. Cool. So
I have a question, sorry.
yeah, what's your question, Varun?
So this is assuming that all the user stories will be like implemented or used, but often what happens is that you have a story in the backlog, or if you implemented something and maybe later on down the line you don't need it or you throw it away, you know. So isn't that wasteful? Is there a way of managing that in a Scrum?
Like if you were to throw something away, you mean, or?
Like, for example, suppose in a product backlog, you have like a password protection, and then
Yeah.
later on you feel instead of password protection, you just want to have something like a touch ID thing. So if either you have already implemented it or it's in your backlog, both cases, and then you want to replace it. So it's kind of wasteful, especially if a developer has spent time in implementing it already and put it in a complete stack. So is there a way of managing that in a Scrum? Like,
So you're saying it's kind of wasteful in what aspect? Like
the time
basically it's
spent,
wasteful
for
to.
example, if I have made a login screen and I put it in complete, and later on we decide to replace this functionality with a simple retinal ID or a touch ID.
Mhm.
So, so this time spent in early development is kind of wasted. The developer could have spent some time in something else. Can we like manage that? Can we like, in Scrum reduce
I see
that
what you're
time?
saying. So basically, um, there may be times when you develop something and then you figure out a better way to do it, right? But that's actually better in a sprint method or methodology versus a waterfall methodology, because here, you do some of this work um, and you get everything working and finished. Um, and then as the customer, like I can tell you whether or not I like the login method at the end of 2 weeks. And then, the next time, if I say I don't like the login method, I want a fingerprint scan, then basically that next sprint after 2 weeks, you guys can change it and it's fresh in your mind. And you can still use obviously the back end code. You just have to change the front end of how it actually works. But as opposed to the waterfall methodology, where I, as the customer, don't get a finished product until here, I'm not involved in any of this process. There might be like 100 things at the end of this whole process that I don't like with my app, if that makes sense. Whereas with this, it's continuous integration with the customer and creating a shippable product. And it allows you to be agile and respond to changes. That's the whole point of it being called agile, right? Because you're able to work in a moving environment and be very like reactive and responsive, because you guys are always you're coding and then checking with me as the customer, and there's a lot of correspondence going back and forth. So if there is something that you don't like or does change, which will happen, you can do it right away, and it's not necessarily like 4 months have gone by and then it's like something that's like fully integrated in the code, and if you change that, you have to change everything, right? You can change it as you go, kind of thing. That's the whole idea. Does that make sense?
Yeah, but like you said about 4 months thing, what if the owner or the customer changes his mind after 4 months? I mean, he's a customer. We can't dictate to him that no, you have to accept it, Is that
Yeah, I mean, and you're going to deal with that as a developer in the real world, no matter what methodology you're using. But typically, a customer won't like change their mind that in like that big of a drastic example. You know what I mean? They want they want to work with you in most cases, and it can be kind of annoying. Like we definitely had scenarios where the customers would get back to us and then they'd be like, oh, they want to change this. Oh, we just worked on this. Oh my goodness. And then it's like, well, they didn't like that. Okay, well, okay, now we have to make another version of it or whatever. But you want to get that out of the way as soon as possible, instead of like doing all of your development work and they don't get to see it at all for the entire year. And then at the end of the year, you show them the product and then they decide that they don't actually like it, right? So in this in this model of working, basically you're involving the customer in a decision process every 2 weeks, so that you can kind of catch things or catch mistakes that they won't like early on, as opposed to like letting it get away and build into a potentially way bigger problem.
Okay. And one
But
last
like,
question.
you can't really control, I guess to answer your question, you can't really control if a customer is going to change their mind or not. We would have certain scenarios where it's like, you know what, like you do your best to please the customer, right? And if something you can't change, or if something's going to be way too expensive to change, then you basically just say like, okay, well, you're going to have to throw some extra money at this because originally you said you wanted A, B, and C, and now you're telling me you want D, E, F, and G, and H, and we didn't even do any of that. So if they change their mind that much, then you have to renegotiate prices or whatever if it's really that big of a deal. You know what I mean?
Yes. One last question.
Yeah.
Well, how will the Scrum change if there is no customer? For example, I'm assuming when you say customer, we're talking about a service-oriented thing, But what if where we something like enterprise facing? What if you're making a product, so and a client-facing product, something like if you want to make a search engine or something. So there's no a customer who says, "Build me a search engine." How will Scrum change for that?
So like if you're a company like Google or something like that.
I think suppose I want to build a startup where I'm making my own product and
Yeah.
I don't have any customers who or company who has paid me money. So who's gonna do the checking? Who's gonna be the one who's satisfied? Who's gonna be the one maintaining our standards as a developer?
I guess it depends. So if you're a startup and you are getting funded by stakeholders, and say you pitched to like people on Shark Tank kind of thing, like that kind of idea, then they would be invested into your company. So they would have a vested interest in, wanting to make their product the way they want it a little bit. So if you have people that are funding you privately, like angel investors and that sort of thing, sometimes investors want to get really involved with your product and they want to have a say. Other times, people, they might think you have a really good idea when you pitch it to them, and they invest and stuff, and they don't really care too much what you say. So in that case, your customer technically, like if you were making a search engine or something, your customer would be the users. So like Google, they don't have like a particular, like you said, user-facing product or whatever. So like I'm a customer of Google kind of thing because I use Google search engine. So you might hire a team of beta testers or something like that, and then you can design it how you want. Um, but you still would have like if you were doing agile development in that scenario, you would still have a product backlog and you'd still choose, say, 3 to 5 or whatever an applicable number of user stories for that sprint to work on. You would do it in a 2 week process and then you would get them to test it, right? And you'd have that potentially shippable product and you'd show your angel investor, or you'd show the people who are funding you, or you'd show your team of whatever 10. If it's a startup, and you'd show your friends, like, hey, test this out, use this website, let me know if you like this or not, whatever changes I've made, I've done this and this. And then they might be like, yeah, that was really cool, I like the colors, but maybe change your search bar style to this because it might make it better on mobile or whatever. And then you go back and you do it over 2 weeks, so it would still work in that scenario, but you wouldn't necessarily have like a relationship with a specific customer, if that makes sense.
Yes, all right. Thank you, Benjamin.
Cool. Yeah, no worries. So yes, I think this would be a good point for us to break before I talk about the actual roles in a Scrum. So this whole thing is the Scrum. Basically, we call this the Scrum, right? Like the 2 week sprints and all of that, or Agile methodology. So there's different roles, and we'll talk about those. I'm going to give you guys a 10-minute break though, because we've been going for a little while. I'll pause my recording here, and then alrighty. So we just finished talking about the introduction to Scrum. Welcome back. We're recording again. We just finished talking about the user stories, the 2 week sprints, and creating a potentially shippable product. I'm going to show you guys an example of what a sprint backlog might actually look like. And then we're going to talk about some roles. Okay. So we used something called Trello before. And has anybody heard of Trello before, actually? Has anyone used it? Has anyone heard of it? Oh, okay, cool. So Trello, you guys can, oh, chat's not open, there you go. you can sign up. It's a free account, but basically, there's these things called boards, and there's something very similar on GitHub. So there's these boards, and this is what it looks like when you log in. And you can see I have all of these workspaces. So I've got a school board, I've got a welcome board. You can see there's boards that are shared between people, and you can see how many members there are. And then you can see a board that I'm like a guest on. Okay. So I'm going to show you with a very, very simple analogy here. So you can use this for anything, and it's basically to organize your workflow. So just like what we were looking, what we were looking at here, okay, the product backlog and the sprint backlog, is basically to organize that kind of stuff. So if we look here again, on my school board, I have 3 columns. So you have, everything's organized kind of like this. You've got a column here. You got a column called in progress here. And then we've got a column called done. All right. And I can move any of these things. So I've got an assignment for application security due June 9th. Okay. Now, once I've started that, I can move it. I can click and drag and put it into the in progress column. All right. And then once it's done, I can move it from in progress to done. Now I can add people. This is kind of cool. You can click a card and you can add a description to it, right? So I can say, assignment for creating login page for app or something like that. Okay. And then we can save that. And then we can actually do a bunch of different things here. Okay. So we won't use all of these, but I'm just going to show you a couple of the functionalities of what Trello is good for. So the description is kind of, what is it? And then you can hide those details here, which is the activity. So I'm the only one on this board. So I added the card to do. Then I moved the card from the to do column to the in progress column just a few seconds ago. Okay. I can add members to a card. So if I wanted to add people, you can add their email here and then they can be on that card. You can add labels. So if you wanted to, organize it for each of your classes, you could have mobile web apps be yellow. You could have another class be orange. A checklist is also a really handy one. So say this is a login page, okay? And never mind that it's called assignment for application security. Let's pretend it's a login page, okay? You can create a checklist. Say there's like 4 or 5 different things that we need to get done. So who can help me out? What would be, yes, it's exactly like Jira, Methune. You've used Jira before? Jira you have to pay for though.
Yes, I have used for. I think it's free for up to 4 members team.
Oh, okay.
For
Yeah, I was gonna say that might be a free version, but so you used it for what did you use it before?
in my previous project, like I worked for a company, like so I was.
Oh, okay, yeah, that worked.
using that.
Awesome. Yeah. So yeah, it's exactly like it might even be made by the same company, Atlassian. I believe it's just a free version of it. But so you can have a checklist. We can call it whatever we want. What would be some items that we would need to create a login? I don't know. You need like login label created. So we can add all of these checklists. So we need the login label created, register label. We need a link to login page. We need a button design. I don't know. We're just making things up right now. But you can add so I've got like 4 things there. And as I work on these, okay, this is in the in progress column. If I had 2 members on here, I could click these and you can see it's 25% completed, 50% completed. As I click out of that, I can see there's 2 out of 4 right there. Okay. And, once it's 4 out of 4, it says completed. It's a green. I can move it over here. And then, now it's in the done column. We can see these ones have some expiry dates on them. So they say overdue. So this is a really, really basic example. I'm going to show you guys a little bit more of a complex example. So this has something called a product backlog. Okay, so these contain all the user stories, and each of these cards will call a user story. All right. So let's pick one here. Password change. So it's in the product backlog. It says it's 5 out of 5. So as a description, it says, as a user, I want to be able to change my password so my account continues to be secure and reliable. I think this is a good start to put in the settings page. It would be great if we could implement a password change utility that emails the user at their TELUS email right now. Success criteria and failure criteria are two things you always want to contain on your user story. So basically, success criteria is going to be what happens if everything goes right. So the passwords match. On an successful overwrite, it redirects to the settings page and displays a success message. A failure criteria is like things that could go wrong. So if a user types the new password, and it doesn't match, display an error message, right? So you want to be able to display an error message. You don't want nothing to happen. You want to be able to inform the user what went wrong. If the old password field is incorrect, display an error message. So if they don't remember what their old password is when they're trying to change it. And if the password change is not completed, display an error message. So we can see here that the different tasks were, these were all the different tasks. New password and confirm must be identical to complete, etc. We can see here that, there's like 3 different people that were on this card. So we had Patrick, we had James, we had Michael, and they added comments and completed the password change functionality, etc. And then we can move some of these tasks over, and we can see that this has got a label on it, easy. So the green ones are easy. This yellow label there is a medium task, which means it requires more work. And then we can see that there'd be some red tasks like this one, and it says hard. So this is working on the actual dashboard front end. And then an even more complex example that I want to show you. So this is a real working startup company that I work for, on the side, just doing some stuff for fun. They don't have things that are called necessarily, like here we have the product backlog, and then every sprint we would move things into the sprint backlog. So you'd pick like, I don't know, 10 cards and put them in there. And during that 2-week sprint, you would move the stuff that is actually in progress. And once it's done in progress, you put it into testing and review. And someone here might put it back in progress. Like say they tested it and it's not actually working the right way, then they move it back into progress, and then they put it back into testing. And once it's done testing, we put it into the done column. And then we have something called history, which is, after the sprint's over, we move them into the history. So you can see all of these sprints, and you can see all the people that are on those sprints, right? Those are little name tags. Something called the ice box is basically things that you might want to do in the future, just ideas, little things that aren't necessarily in the product backlog, like they have to be done, but they'd just be nice to have. Okay. Now here's the real example of the startup that I'm working for. They don't have the same column names, but basically you have proposed. Okay, so these are just ideas. You have the to-do, which is like this has to be done. Then you have in progress, testing, merged, right? Because we're using version control, so you want to know if it's merged and it's actually in the production on the GitHub, and then completed. And then like you were asking earlier, Varun, about canceled, or if you decide not to do something, you can put some stuff over there, like the user stories. If you decide like, oh, I don't want my password to be this way, then you can cancel that. If that makes sense. Now, some of the labels here have been they're a little bit different. We've got high priority, we've got CET integration. The labels are just a way you can organize the stuff that you want. All right, and this is just a very, very basic overview. You can look at the board in different ways. You can look at it in timeline, you can look at a dashboard, etc. And then you can see like who is actually working on different tasks or who's on tasks. Another tool on GitHub. I want to go to GitHub. I think they have something called GitHub project boards right here. So it's a very similar thing. You can create a board to manage your projects. So you can do it all in one place. I've never used this before. Has anyone used it on GitHub before? So you can add a column. So we could do this, call this product backlog. Same exact idea. We can call this in progress. So maybe we can do it all on GitHub because that's where we're doing everything else. And then we can have this testing. We would need a sprint backlog. And then the sprint backlog would have to be moved over here, and then we would have done and then history. Is this making sense to you guys? Any questions about this stuff? And then I can add all my user stories to my product backlog. So if I wanted to make a login page, okay, add that. Login page, if I edit this note, okay, so it's a little bit less intuitive in terms of like labeling and adding like users per card and stuff. Convert to issue, so you can have a body. Add login screen. Sorry guys, I'm just playing around with this because I've never used it on GitHub before. I just want to see if we should use this or if we should use Trello. Login screen, button. Okay, so that actually is going to open up GitHub. You can see login page is now open there. It's out of my project board. It's interesting. Okay. Anyways, getting a little bit distracted. Back to this. So we want to talk about the roles. It's similar to Jira, and you're going to have different roles as we go through the Scrum. And you can think about what role you want to have, but we're going to try everybody to have a different role throughout the weeks that we do this over the semester. So basically, in your groups, you can start talking about this, and I'll put an announcement. Product owner is basically the stakeholder of the customer. So that's going to be me, okay? Now, we're not really going to change that throughout this because I'm going to want to be giving you feedback and I want to hear, how your meetings are going, what you guys have done. I'm going to be keeping track of like how much development you're doing and looking at your GitHub boards, seeing who's collaborating. I basically want to maximize my business value out of the product. So I want to make sure you guys are getting as much done as possible. I'm responsible for maintaining the product backlog. So like telling you what I want done to the project. Now for this, you guys are going to be doing that because it's your actual product. But for me, I'm going to be the customer in terms of giving you guys feedback and like meeting with you on a weekly basis to hear about how it's going, who's working in the group, how everything is going in the sprint, what you guys' problems are, etc. Cool. So that's the product owner. The development team. So that's going to be most of you guys. Typically, we would do this if we had more people in the class. We would have groups of 10 people is typically like a nice Scrum team. But because we're smaller, everybody's going to have to be a couple people here. But typically a group of 7 plus or minus 2 responsible for delivering the actual shippable product at the end of each sprint. So you guys are the actual developers. And you guys will have all the different skill sets you need. So your database, your front end, your website, your quality assurance, your bug testing, your debugging, all of that. You're autonomous, which means you work on your own. You don't need people to be giving you direction. You don't need me to be telling you what to do. You know that your product needs to be done. And over the 2 weeks, you have those Trello boards and you're like, okay, we're working on these 3 cards. I'm going to be looking at those Trello boards and then basically being like, did they get this stuff done? Why not? Etc. What can we improve for next time? And then at the end of the semester, hopefully we have a finished product, okay? Self-organizing, so there's no direction on how to convert the product backlog into deliverables. So I'm not going to tell you which ones to pick from your product backlog, but you're going to be able to pick your own, 3 to 5 user stories and finish them for that week. And then you have the Scrum Master. So this person, and we can change this and rotate it on a usual basis. One person could be Scrum Master for a couple sprints for a month and then switch over to another person. They're responsible for enforcing the rules of the Scrum. So they will remove any impediments for the development team. So if one person can't develop because of a database issue or because they need a license for something, they're going to get that. That's going to be what they try to get rid of. They're going to get rid of any distractions that are roadblocks for the development team. And then they're basically going to be a liaison between the rest of the organization and the Scrum Masters. In this scenario, they're basically a liaison between any developers. They're going to organize those Zoom meetings that you guys are going to have, the stand-up meetings, and facilitate all those Scrum events, so the planning, the review, all the retrospectives. So each sprint, you have a retrospective where you look back and then you say, what could we have done differently? What could we have done better? What is a user story? So kind of like what I was showing you in Trello, each of those cards would be a user story. They have a front and a back, so to say, or they have like a checklist with the success and the failure criteria, and then they have actual design mockups. So you can see if I go back to my Trello, we can see for some of these pages, there's actual images included. So this is called a weekly minimums planner. It's a key metric, and there's success criteria down here. And I've got my description. As a user, I want to be able to have a central location where I can compare stats and team member stats. This is going to be a hub for transaction data, etc. Right? And then we can see the attachments down here. So there's two images. There's the key metrics wireframe, so the wireframe design, and then the WMP picture. So if I click this, I can see the key metrics wireframe, and I can see what it's supposed to look like. And we can see this was made on NinjaMock right here. It's got the links and etc. And then I can also click the WMP and see what it should actually look like. Okay, this is an example of the data coming from TELUS, the weekly minimums planner, and then this is what we want it to look like when we put it online. Cool? So each card should have a wireframe of what you're trying to do, the title, so this is called user login, the number, so this is user story 1, and then the success and failure criteria and a description of how it's supposed to work. So a user story, as a user, you want to be able to the ability to upload a photo to your asset library one at a time. Okay, so let's say, for example, we're making an app like Instagram and you want to upload a photo. So as a user, that's what I want. Success criteria would be, upon clicking the upload button, there's going to be a file selection dialog box that allows me to pick only JPEG photos. Okay. Number 2, I can browse my file system and select one JPEG file at a time to upload. And then number 3, I can, upon successful upload, the photo is added to my library. Okay, those are the 3 things that will happen if everything goes perfectly. So step 1, 2, 3 in the order that they happen. The failure criteria, or failure messages, basically, if something goes wrong, what will I try to do to catch an error? If it failed to add the photo to the asset library, it'll say, please try again or select a different file. Okay, so that's what the failure criteria is. It's basically preparing for a worst case scenario. What happens if there's an error? How do I inform the user of the error? What is the product backlog? So kind of talked about this a little bit already, but it's an ordered and prioritized list of the user stories or the requirements that need to be implemented. It's dynamic and evolving. So that's important to remember here. So on Trello, this is always being added to. Okay, so you can always add more user stories as they come. So like you said, Varun, earlier, what if something changes? What if the customer changes their mind? The whole point of this is to be reactive and dynamic and evolving. So it's never stagnant. You don't just make a list and then do it all. You might change your mind about how you want to do a login screen, and then you make a card for that to implement that. It should be groomed periodically by the product owner with input from the development team. So you want to make sure that there's not stuff just sitting in there. So that's what that icebox was. If there was stuff just sitting there and it's never getting done, you move it over there and you're like, okay, this is an issue that's not being dealt with for a long time. And we obviously haven't touched it for a reason. 2 user stories with similar business value and priority. A is less development effort and B is more due to higher complexity. Which one is ordered first? What do you guys think? Say you had 2 user stories. I'd put the one with more complexity first, right? Because you want to deal with any issues before they're a problem. Cool. All right. Product backlog. That's what the product backlog is. What is the sprint backlog? Basically, it's a set of user stories from the product backlog that the development team commits to completing in the current sprint. Okay. So a sprint is 2 weeks at a time. You guys are going to pick a bunch of user stories from your product backlog, commit to finishing them, and put them into your sprint backlog. The commitment occurs during your sprint planning, and the team must complete the sprint backlog by the end of the sprint, according to the team's definition of done, right? So definition of done is basically like we've checked to make sure there's no bugs, we've done our quality assurance, and it is now up on GitHub, and everything has been merged, right? And your definition of done can be different. It doesn't maybe Maybe it doesn't have to be uploaded to GitHub. Maybe the code just has to be bug-free. User stories are not assigned. Each developer chooses a new story to work on after each completed user story. So you're going to be working as a team, but you're kind of going to be managing yourself. You're not necessarily being told by me what user story you have to do, okay? You know what has to be done. When you're finished doing a user story, you pick a new one and you work on it, right? And your Scrum Master can be the one who organizes some of that stuff, but as a developer, you know, basically you keep yourself busy and you pick a new story once you're finished. The development team can overachieve by adding more user stories from the product backlog after all your originally committed items have been completed. So you can always pick more, but you don't want to pick too many and then not finish them. And then we can talk about burn down charts and task boards. Like the task board is basically our Trello board. Sprint planning. So basically that's going to be a meeting at the beginning of each sprint where you go through the product backlog and you pick your sprint backlog, right, from the product backlog. You break down the user stories into specific tasks, and you must commit to finishing these tasks for that sprint. Keep adding the user stories to the sprint backlog until the team feels like there's enough for that sprint. And at the conclusion, the user stories and tasks are typically placed on a task board, and the sprint begins. Stand-up meetings. So these are going to be, you're going to have stand-up meetings, and I'll probably pop into them throughout the week, but it won't be every single day. This is just kind of to get you guys an idea of what the Agile environment is like. But basically, you can have a stand-up meeting minimum, I would say, once a week. If you want to do it twice a week, do it twice a week. But you guys will have time in class or out of class to do these stand-up meetings. And I would like to kind of be a fly on the wall and listen to what you guys talk about. But basically, it's going to be, what have you done since our last meeting? What are you planning to do by the next meeting? And are there any things that you're having challenges with? Are you blocked by anything? So that's what you talk about in the stand-up meeting. You go around your team, you talk about those three things. You talk about the cards that you finished, and then you talk about what your challenges are. So definition of done, I talked about this a little bit earlier, but what does your group feel is sufficient quality? So for your product backlog or your sprint backlog, when you do a user story, you know, has it been checked by a second set of eyes? So for quality assurance or quality control, do the requirements, are they all met? Is it expandable for future features? Is the code readable? Has it been commented? And is it efficient, right? So is it working the way it's meant to be? Is it uploaded? Does it meet your definition of done? Because some people might think like, oh, I did the code, but I never actually sent it to GitHub. Well, it's done, but it's like, is it done? It's not actually done because it hasn't been checked by anybody and it hasn't been merged into a pull request. Cool. At the end of each sprint, you're going to have something called a sprint demo. And basically the Scrum Master will make sure that this is organized and takes place. So this is, as a Scrum Master, this is a responsibility you have. And the development team will showcase the results of their sprint to the product owner, which would be me. Okay, so at the end of the 2-week period, you're going to have a meeting with me that we organize, and then we're going to look at all of the stuff that you worked on for that sprint, okay? Basically, you guys will discuss any accomplishments you made and any problems you encountered and how they were solved. And I'm not going to be grading necessarily your development skill, but I'm going to be grading, you know, how you guys work as a team, how you guys actually communicate and use the Trello board, how you guys are using the Agile methodology and, you know, working through your roadblocks. But I'm also going to be keeping track of how much you're actually getting finished, because this is a development program. We're trying to make a mobile app, and we're trying to replicate what you guys would be experiencing in the real world through a Scrum environment. So basically, at the end of these 4 months in December, you guys are going to have a shippable product as a group, right? It will be finished. We'll be able to put it on the App Store, and it'll be a working app. What else? The development team will ask the product owner the results of the sprint if they're acceptable and considered complete. So you guys are going to ask me, you know, did we meet our threshold? Because at the beginning of the sprint, you're going to tell me the cards that you're working on, the user stories and everything you want in that sprint backlog. And at the end of it, I'm going to say, okay, you committed to these 4 cards. Did you get them done? And then I'm going to say, okay, is this complete or not? Why didn't you finish this card, or etc. In a real world scenario, you would see if they're willing to work on another sprint, right? Like if there's issues, maybe you guys stop the project. But in this case, we're going to keep doing sprints until the end of the semester. I will then discuss the state of your product backlog. So I'll say, you know, what are the next things that I want you guys to finish? And then collaboration will take place amongst the entire group to decide the direction of the product and any revisions that need to be made. Cool. So then as a group after that meeting with me, you guys will have a meeting with yourselves to basically say what went well, what went poorly, and how do we improve for our next sprint? How do we get better? So lots of meetings, as you can see, but it's not wasted time. They're really quick, like snappy 5 to 10 minute meetings. What are you working on? What can you do? What can you do better? And then you guys get to work as developers. You don't necessarily just stay in meeting rooms all day. So sprint artifacts are basically these things that we use. They're tools that we use or feedback mechanisms to help measure our progress, and they give visibility to our sprint. So for example, a sprint artifact or tool, if you want to think about it like that, is our task board, our Trello board. So ideally, it can be a physical board, it can be a whiteboard that you have up on the wall if you guys are all working from, say, an office or something. Or it can be something like Jira, right? Or Trello or GitHub. And there are user stories in one of 3 columns. Okay, so you have your to-do, your in progress, and your done. Now I'm gonna get you guys to do a couple more columns than that because you can have your product backlog and your sprint backlog. Excuse me, but typically those 3 columns must be there. Another one that you can use is a burn down chart. I don't know if you guys have ever used a burn down chart, but it's something you can use from Microsoft Project. And basically, if you have all of these tasks labeled, it'll give you an ideal burn down, and where you guys are is the red line, which would be your actual burn down, where it tracks your progress of the user stories. And when they're moved into the done column, you can see days in sprint here is 11, and then the story points remaining. So say you have 5 boards or 5 user stories. Story points you basically assign to each user story. So you typically would want each sprint to have something like 30 points in it. And you know how I showed you guys that example with the easy, the medium, and the hard tasks? So an easy board or an easy user story might be worth 1 point. A medium might be worth 2 points, and then a hard might be worth 3 points. So you could either do 10 hard tasks, or maybe a hard would be worth 10 points. I don't know. So you could have 3 difficult tasks, and that's 30, or you could have 30 easy tasks because they're 1 point each, right? You always want it to be around 30 points, and then it burns down, and you can see your actual progress in a chart if you do that. Yeah, and then you can use other programs to track your progress, like Pivotal Tracker, but we won't be using that. Cool. Any questions about any of those Scrum roles or tools, artifacts, anything like that?
I have a question.
Mhm.
These Scrum softwares like Asana or Trello, are they like just new in the market? I'm assuming that before the pandemic, everybody used physical boards and physical sticky notes, and these softwares came as a replacement because of the pandemic, or was they before only?
Yeah, so we used them before. So the program I used, just like Methune was saying, was called Jira, sorry. And it was before the pandemic. This one, you can see the initial release was actually 2002, which is 19 years ago, which is crazy. But the company I worked for, actually everyone was remote, and you would go to the office maybe once a month or something to meet people in person. But basically everybody was working remotely, and you'd have people in Nova Scotia, you'd have people in California, and we had people literally all over the world. And we'd meet up in these meetings, and we would use Atlassian is the company that makes it, but we would use Jira, and I want to see if they actually show the Jira board. It looks very similar to Trello. The thing with Jira is you can implement it with Scrum boards. So you can get it free, but I don't actually know. There, yeah. See, look, it looks the exact same as Trello. The thing with Jira is you can also implement automated testing, and you can have batch jobs that are hosted online and stuff that actually run your code automatically once they're put into a certain column. And you can set up webhooks with GitHub as well, so that when the code is been pull requested, it'll move the things around accordingly into like the to-do or the testing column, and then like it'll send notifications to say your superior to do the quality assurance review or whatever. But yeah, so to answer your question in a long answer, yes, they were around before the pandemic, I think. But I'm sure that their popularity increased a ton after the pandemic, right? Because everybody went remote. But it is really good for you guys to understand the concepts because they'll be used in the real world when you guys start developing.
Thank you.
Sorry, I get a little wordy with my answers. I need to stop talking so much. But yeah, okay, so you can get it for free. Methune, you were saying you can get it for free, but it supports up to 10 users or 3 agents, 2 gigabytes of storage, offers community support, no credit card needed. So for you guys, actually, you could use Jira, and it might be good for you to use Jira because it's the industry standard. Which one? I have to do a bit of research before I get you guys to actually sign up here for which one. Jira is used with Visa, Cisco.
I'm using the free plan only.
Who was that said that?
Mithun.
Methune. Okay, you were using the free Jira?
Yes.
And how did you sign in? Did you have to use a work email or how did that work?
Yeah, using my work email, I signed up.
So not everybody necessarily has that. So like here, I don't know if it would work. You have to have a site.atlassian.net. Oh,
I
I
think
see.
we cannot use a Gmail account.
You can use Asana. I have used to use Asana with my Gmail account.
So let's see. You can basically choose what your site would be called. So I won't take this name, but if you wanted coveassurance.atlassian.net, just make a test one with my last name. Hit agree. I'm just using Gmail. Let's see if it works with my Gmail. Okay, it looks like it is working. What type of team do you work? Software development? Sure.
The main advantage is like we can create documentation using Confluence.
Oh, that's what this is?
Yes.
So Confluence is different than the board, right?
Yeah, that's only for documentation.
Yeah. So they have a bunch of different products. So they have, where is the list of what they offer? Product guide. They have Confluence. Here's their Scrum boards is one of the features or one of their products. Let's see. They also have, instead of GitHub, they also have version control systems. So instead of using GitHub, we use Bitbucket or something through them. And then what else do they have? Let's see. The #1 development tool used by Agile teams. There you go. So it would be good for you guys to know this one. Select some teams, some tools. Oh, Jenkins. Yeah, that's what we use for Jenkins. Use GitHub. Sure. So you can invite your teammates here. Here we'll say new to Jira. Team is experienced with Agile methodologies. Cool. So you would choose a Scrum board once you're logged in. I think you can use the Scrum board. Okay. So let's see. Have your backlog. You can organize the cycles into sprints and understand your team's velocity and actually work down the. Okay, so you can have epics, stories, bugs, tasks, subtasks, workflow, to do, in progress, and done. So we can use this template. And then choose a project type. You need to create a new project if you decide to switch projects. So you can have team managed or company managed. So set up and managed by your team will probably be the best. In a self-contained space, yeah. Team managed. Cool. And then here you can make your team. So if you guys are the cyber Vikings or whatever, yeah, connect repositories. So we can connect our GitHub, I believe, to this. Obviously, you put your team name here, and then the key is going to be what appears before as a prefix before your project issues to recognize the work from this project. Obviously, you only have one project board, but so we'll hit next. And instead of Bitbucket Cloud, we probably want to, more options, workspace. Bitbucket is their tool, so they probably try to use, yeah, we want to get GitHub, but they say they have GitHub Enterprise. So I don't know if that'll work. I just want to know if this will work for you guys. Sorry. Team or user account. Just URL. Let's see. Yeah. So I don't know if it'll work because you don't have an enterprise GitHub account, right? You guys just have the free versions of GitHub. Upgrade, but I'll have to figure that out because I don't want to use Bitbucket, but cool. Well, we'll figure this out another time. But I just wanted to introduce you guys to sprints and scrums. But my whole plan for this, basically, we'll figure out the tools that we want to specifically use. Don't forget to do the lab there. We'll figure out the tools that we want to specifically use as we do this, but we're going to organize, or you guys are going to organize yourselves in the teams and do those sprints. And I'm going to be a part of them kind of as a fly on the wall. And I'm going to be there as you guys do the design planning and the sprint planning and all of that stuff. So I'm going to come up with a document that you guys can use as sort of a sprint plan document as you guys get your development stuff underway. But let's talk about the assignment 1 and assignment 2 that you guys can use kind of to start you guys off with this. So assignment 1 and assignment 2 are now available in the assignments and tests folder. It'll be a group project, like all of this stuff will be a group project here. So you can click the link and it will take you here. Cool, and I don't think this is right because this is from my other. Okay. So assignment 1, assignment 2, they're in their respective folders. I'll just open them up here. And you guys are pretty much done these already. If you guys have the stuff on your GitHub, then you're basically done. So you can see here, it'll just be slightly modifying what you have on your GitHub to match this format. So instead of submitting a PDF, it'll be on your GitHub. And basically, it'll have these contents. So it'll have your introduction, including your business, brand name, slogan, and logo. It'll have a clear verbal description of what the intended system will do, accompanying the use case diagrams. That's 45% of the assignment. It'll have the software, hardware technologies that you're planning on using for the development. So if you're using Android Studio, iOS, and then any other tools that you may use, like databases and Firebase or anything like that, Amazon web services, what you hope to learn from doing the suggested project. So you can have a little blurb from each of you guys here as collaborators. Research on what systems already exist. So I want to see competitive advantage. So like looking at the Miro boards. On your Miro board, you guys had a section for this already for the competitive advantage or what already exists out there. So if I zoom in here, what already exists, you know, you can see they have the freelancers, the Handybook website app. Basically, that's what you put in this section, who your competitors are and how your system will offer a competitive advantage. And then 6, the target audience you wish to reach, which is also, I believe there was one on this, users and target audience right here. Senior citizens, working professionals, and then you're going to include how do you wish to reach them? How are you going to market to those people? Where are you going to advertise? Are you going to, you know, set up target groups? So yeah, basically there's the price or the market breakdown there. If you have any questions, my email's there. And then this is just kind of a format. You don't really have to follow this exactly, but this is what it might look like on your GitHub as I scroll down through there. So it'll have your names, your group name, and then it'll have the title, the business name, the slogan, the logo up here, the description, the link to your use case diagram, and then the number of components on this project. So the components are a little bit different than the technologies and frameworks used. So this will be like the language or the technology. So if it's Android Studio or Java, and then the components might be like a server web end, server backend, or a web interface, or you know, a Facebook game, cross-platform mobile app, etc. And then you're going to have the existing systems, and then how you're going to compete, what your competitive advantage is, and have links to the existing systems. Okay. The target audience, who your target audience is, and how you intend to reach them. Your use case diagram. Oh, and then don't forget about what you hope to learn from doing the project. That one kind of gets skipped over sometimes. And then your use case diagrams, which you guys already have on the GitHub. All right, so it's just going to look very similar to this. Does that make sense? So just slightly modifying what you have in your GitHub already. The second part of it, assignment 2, because you guys already, I know you guys already have all of the stuff done for your wireframes. Same thing on that GitHub README. As a group, you're going to collaborate and you're going to upload your wireframes. So basically, I want to see 1 point for each screen for the design. So you're going to have 5 screens, at least 5 screens. Each screen will get a point for the design. So color, graphics, icons. Constraints, don't really worry about this too much. If you're not doing it for Android, you don't have to worry about the constraints. The UX wireframe, so ones with no color, no images, just the layout, and then a description about each of the screens. So for you guys, Methune, you guys have more than 5 screens already, so I would say that would already be done. That's already finished. Just add that description for each of those screens. So have like a little blurb underneath for each one. About each screen, if that makes sense.
So we haven't added any constraint on the wireframes.
Don't worry about the constraints.
That's
I changed my mind about that. If you want to show constraints, you can, but don't worry about that. I won't take marks off. So then the UX, you're adhering to the guidelines of no color and placeholders for images, which you guys are. Uniform UX, so you know there's a pattern or it looks similar, which they do. And then good use of screen real estate. So it's not cluttered, things are aligned. There's good use of white space, which your guys' screens look great. So, and then the UI, there's also 10 points for this one. So you're matching the layout in the wireframes. So the UI looks similar. So if I look at this sign-in screen here, the logo and the 2 labels with a button at the bottom, I should see a logo with 2 labels and then the button at the bottom. So there is uniformity there. The uniform color is across the screen, so I can see this light blue is a theme color that you guys have chosen, so that's good. Uniform font, text sizing, headings, text sizing, and subheadings across the 5 screens, so that looks like you guys have used the same font and heading sizes. Good use of icons, images, and graphics. and good thought put into the overall UI and design. All right, and then here's an example of what it might look like. So you have your UI, your UX, and then the description. And then if you have constraints, you can show the constraints. All right, so basically, if you have a login screen, I'm expecting to see at least 3, and if you want to show the constraints, then 4. Okay, so don't forget to add the description. But basically for this, I'm expecting to see at least 5 screens that are already wireframed and UI designed. Okay, and then you're just going to add that description to your GitHub, so it'll all be in one place. All right, does that make sense?
You have to submit it in a PDF or Figma file, something like that.
Sorry, say that again.
To submit that like in a PDF.
In a period?
PDF format.
Oh, PDF. Where was that? No, so just put it on your GitHub, actually. I like the idea of having it like hosted on your version control system. Because if you do your PDF, then everybody has to submit one. But if you just do it as a group on your GitHub, then each person can contribute one of these sections. And then I want to see what you hope to learn from doing this project, like this one right here. I want to see an answer from everybody, but basically everything else is group, like will be collaboration. So what you guys do, research, one person can do the existing systems, one person can do the target audience and how you're going to reach them. One person can be in charge of your use case diagrams. One person can be in charge of your components. One person can be in charge of the technology and frameworks or the description. You guys can break it up between your groups however you want, and then just put it up on your GitHub. Basically, the lab I had you guys do kind of prepared you for this, and then it's just a little bit of formatting to make it look like the assignments and make sure that everything is there.
So everything should be in the GitHub only. You don't need any physical like document submitted in the Blackboard.
Yeah,
Right?
just submit your GitHub link.
So
If that
I
makes
have
sense.
already shared our previous research document in Blackboard. Can you have a look at it and suggest us the modification?
Research document. What submission did you put it under? Let's see here. Was that in the group submission?
Yes. I think it's in assignment and test folder.
Yeah, the submit for the group. Okay, let me take a look here.
So there will be a doc file.
Is it this one here?
Yeah, exactly.
Strategy, user needs, business requirements, planning. Yeah, so all of this stuff is great. And then just make sure, okay, you do have user stories. Okay, cool. Yeah, awesome. So yeah, you have your technology stack in there. Perfect. Key deliverables. So most of it's in there. The only thing I don't see
Activity.
would be the competitive advantage or the target audience, those two things. But all these functional requirements, I mean, you can include them. It's all great to keep your documentation all in one spot. But the user stories, this will be more so for your Trello, if that makes sense, for your board, your storyboard. Does that make sense? But like this, you can use this in your introduction or your description of the project. And then this you can put under like your target user, but then also include like who your users are, and then the competitors. I didn't see anything in there about competitors.
Okay.
Yeah, does that answer your question?
Yes, fine.
Yeah, so you guys should have most of this stuff done for this already. So these assignments should be easy marks for you guys because you kind of did most of this stuff in semester 1 with Mustafa. Cool. And then I will put out, I guess, a plan schedule for you guys to start your sprints and your scrums on your development on the actual development phase for next week. Cool? And then we can actually start doing some of the sprint meetings and the stand-up meetings, and then you guys can actually start. I mean, you guys have developed some of the code, correct? Like Methune, for your project here, for the actual code and the views, how much of the project is actually working?
I think we have to integrate a payment SDK.
Okay.
That is the only one pending. Like after our payment, there will be a like policy that we can download into our mobile.
So like you guys have a login and the sign in and all of this, these screens are all working?
Yes, everything is working.
Okay. And even like the statistics, do they actually load like real data from a
Yeah, we have
API or
a
something?
public API.
Okay, cool. Your team hasn't developed the app. Yeah, so you guys might be in a different boat, right? It just depends how much you guys did last semester. But a lot of this semester, so if you guys have this done, then I'm going to push you guys even harder to develop some more features on top of it because you guys have another semester to keep developing. For the teams that haven't developed the app, so Hari, and then Sunfam, how about your group? How far are you guys on your app?
I think we already finished that. Well,
You finished
maybe
yours too?
not on the back end side. The back end side is still dummy data, but on the front end, the app side is almost complete.
Cool. So I'm gonna I'm gonna create basically a schedule of meetings that we can follow along in our teams, and then I'm gonna meet with each team next week to discuss like where you guys are at with the current development process, and I'll try to get a gauge on like how far along each of you guys are, and then kind of next steps. So if you guys are finished your app except for the back end, then this semester you're gonna develop the back end and get the database and add a couple of other things on top of it. Methune for you guys, like the payment API, and then obviously some other things in quality assurance and bug checking, and we'll try to come up with some other screens so you guys have some development work to do as well in the agile process. And then Harry will meet and discuss where your guys' app is at and what planning needs to be done. And then we'll start doing some of those sprints and those scrums. Does that sound like a plan? Yeah, okay. Um, yeah, I think that would be it for today then. I wanted to cover purchasing the developer licenses and stuff, but that might have to wait for next week anyways. So cool. All right. Well, I'll stop the recording here then, and good talk about the Scrum and planning documents. And then I'll put together a schedule for that stuff for next week. So you guys keep your eyes on your email or your announcements. Get started on assignment 1 and 2. I think, when did I make them due? Check. They are due the same time, and I think because you guys have most of this stuff done, I made them due Saturday, October 2nd. So next week and 1 day. So just put that stuff on your GitHub and you'll be good to go. They're both due the exact same time, 11:59. So next Saturday, 11:59 midnight. Cool. Cool. I'll figure out whether, Jira, Trello, and all that stuff, you guys can kind of play around with them and see which ones you like. I'll give you guys the option. And then I'll figure out, with the GitHub integration for each and how to run through that. But we're going to use boards and we're going to have a meeting next week and kind of I'll be the customer or the client. We'll figure out development for this term. Coolio. All right. Well, I'll see you guys in a little bit. I want to give you guys a break. So I'll stop the recording here.